There we go. Shalom. Shalom. Okay. So here we are, we're talking about the mitzvah of Bnei Noach and the idea of the covenant of Noach. I have been asked, my name is Dov Avraham Ben-Shorr, or Ibn Shor, depending on where you take it from. Anyway, I am a rabbi and a dayan, a judge, and I sit on several courts, including a court for Bnei Noach, for the children of Noach. We'll get into that in a moment, what that means. Bnei means children of. Bnei Israel, children of Israel. Bnei Noach, children of Noach. And I've been asked by a lot of people, because I teach here and there, to try and give some sort of lesson, video lesson on the idea of Noach and the idea of the covenant of Noach, and to introduce the concept to as many people as are there. The idea, this week we read about the Noach in the Torah. This is the weekly Sidra, the weekly portion called Noach. And every Jew on Shabbat tomorrow will be reading or hearing the whole story of Noach and how God was a little bit frustrated, might be the right word, a little bit fed up with humanity and the way we were conducting our lives, which, by the way, immediately suggests that there were rules. Anybody that suggests that there weren't rules has a problem, because it would be unfair to expect man to live up to certain rules if we, of course, are not, don't know what those rules are. It's like, it's kind of like stacking the deck against you, as so to speak. In any event, this week we learn about Noah and how before the flood, man's relationship with nature and with each other was horrible. We were not respecting life. We were not respecting nature. We were not respecting property. We were not respecting God. We were not respecting the entire concept of truth that God revealed to us. And we had been in a downward slope since getting kicked out of the garden until the time of Noah, when God decides to destroy the world by flood. God decides to destroy the world by flood, and then after the flood, he renews the covenant. No, the covenant actually existed from Adam Rishon, the first man. When he made the covenant, the question is whether it included everything or not. There's some that suggest that there were 6 mitzvot, 6 commandments for Adam, and Noah was added another one. There's actually a debate about that within our sources, but we'll ignore that debate for the moment because it's not so relevant. What's relevant is what's come down to us at this point, what we are obligated to, what we have a responsibility for, what we are have a relationship with God with, and concerning, and God and Noah brought out animals, made an offering to Hashem, to God, and set about renewing the covenant. There's a sign of the covenant, that's the rainbow, which actually most people love the rainbow. It's actually a very pretty thing. There's even a special blessing that you say. However, one should know that the fact that the sign of the rainbow is basically a sign that says that God remembers his promise to Noah, that he's not going to destroy the world, even though we deserve it. Therefore, seeing a rainbow is not always necessarily a good sign. Still more welcome to enjoy it, like the colors. Say a blessing if you want on the beauty. However, know that we could be doing better. What is this getting better? What are the 7 mitzvot of Noach? Now, first of all, they're not 7. We say 7 because it's a nice number. And it's like saying there are 10 commandments. Anybody that knows anything about Torah and Judaism knows that there are really 613 commandments, which also have all their various categories. The 10 commandments are the super categories. They're the big categories. Just like the 7 mitzvot of the Bnei Noach are the big categories. What are those big categories? They're basically ideas which most people would more or less agree upon. The who's and the what's and the specifics maybe not, but at least in the big idea. There's the idea of justice, the idea of setting up a functioning society that works towards making sure that there is an address for dispute. It's my car. No, that's your. No, okay. Well, let's go to the judges or the magistrate, and we'll work this out. It has to do with things that are lawful and dealing with law, and basically all of common law would be an concept of justice, and the idea of being able to work things out. And in the society, it would also involve making special rules and special enactments so that the society can function, like a stoplight, and other things like that, so that people don't endanger each other. The other concepts, the second one would be blasphemy, right? The idea of respecting God and respecting Him as the Creator and showing due and proper respect to God. No blasphemy, right? Not diminishing the holy, right? Not cheapening the world, right? Just like we don't want to cheapen humanity, other person, right? We want to show people respect. We have the Creator of all humanity in the world. We need to show respect as well. The idea of idolatry is prohibited. Idolatry is a horrible, horrible thing. We're not even aware of it. We do it. We hit on the idolatry all the time, and we know it's when we it has to do with focus and what's the importance and what's the real goal and why are we here. Idolatry basically is a selfish form of service, right? It basically says you work for me. It's basically saying God works for me and He has to do my will, not that I have to try and figure out what the purpose of the world is and try and my responsibility. It's saying you work for me, right? It's like the maid telling the governess who what she should do. And then of course another category has to do with all sorts of modesty and illicit relationships and respecting the sexual being. Us as sexual beings, the most potent and powerful nature needs to be put in a good framework, because unfortunately, because it is so powerful and has actually really potential for good, it also has a lot of potential for doing things that are cheapening of the human and the other, usually the woman, though not always. And therefore those relationships need to be kept in a certain amount of check and responsibility and in a framework to make sure that the person is respected, not only and not going after the lust, after the pleasure, because while pleasure is good in its framework and can be good with the capital G, it is not an end in itself, right? It's just like for instance nuclear fission. We do fission. We haven't learned fusion yet. Eventually, God willing, we'll learn fusion too. But we haven't learned we learned fission, right? The idea of nuclear fission actually is could potentially be a huge boon. Could free energy. I remember 50 years ago, everybody thought that this was going to bring free, like, not that I was around 50 years ago, but that they thought there was going to bring free electricity to everybody. This was the answer to all our prayers, everything like that. And the truth is, nuclear fission has brought a lot of good to the world and can do a lot of things. A lot of medical things are also based on nuclear, the idea of splitting the atom. But at the same time, as we also know, the splitting of the atom also can cause a lot of destruction and bring a lot of horrible things. And it has to do with how you use the vessel, how you use the tool. Again, so the more potent and powerful the tool, of which marital relations are very potent, very powerful, need to be put in a much more safeguarded, much more higher framework. The next one is respecting life. The idea of homicide, murder. It's prohibited to murder people. Killing is, we'll get to that when we talk about that specific subject, but killing and murder are not synonymous. They are similar but not synonymous. We'll get to that when we get there. The idea also of protecting property is also very important. Someone's property, someone's person. The idea of theft being obviously forbidden matter. And again, there's a lot of categories with that. And then there's another category which everyone kind of raises an eyebrow. The severing of the limb of a living animal. You're not allowed to take the limb from a living animal. That's one of the laws of Noach, which specifically in our Sidra Hayom, in our Parsha, in our Torah portion today, God specifically tells Noach, you're not allowed to take a limb from a living animal. Now, the bigger category is obviously respecting nature, respecting animal life, dealing with animals and other things. The Jewish concept of which is probably also applies to B'nai Noach. We'll get to the specifics eventually, about not causing undue distress to animals, and the idea of respecting nature in general. Most people raise an eyebrow because who would cut off the leg of a living animal, right? Everybody knows the old joke about the farmer with the pig that has three wooden legs, and the salesman comes and the salesman looks at the farmer and says, "Why does this pig have three wooden legs?" And the farmer says, "Oh, that pig's special. One day we had a fire in the house. This pig ran in, pulled all the children out by their collars, saved everybody." So the salesman says, "Oh, so he was injured in the fire?" The farmer says, No. The pig got out scot-free. He's fine." So the salesman says, "So why the wooden legs?" He says, "Well, a pig like that you can't eat all at once." There's actually a lot of deep meaning to that joke, because unfortunately we do a lot of things like that where we really exactly, and so therefore I'll leave that joke a little bit to the side, but the idea of eating from a limb from a living animal exists today. In fact, I'm told by my friends in Texas that mountain oysters was a big delicacy there, and mountain oysters basically happen to be the testes of a not a cow, the male part, a bull, and the reason they cut them off is so that they focus not on reproduction but focus on getting fat, and then they serve these mountain oysters as a delicacy. So it is actually a thing that exists, and it's not something that's unheard of. Probably was a lot more popular back in the day, though it also doesn't. But I don't know when they didn't have refrigerators. But even that doesn't seem to be all that possible. But it does exist, so we have to be careful about that. In any event, I'm not going to talk about any of the specifics today. I'm more going to talk about the general category of the covenant of Noach and B'nai Noach, as opposed to B'nai Yisrael. B'nai Yisrael, the children of Israel, is what we tend to call people that are Jews today, though Jews is probably a bigger category. I'll talk about that another time. I'm in the process of actually writing a book about that, which is going over 1,000 pages at the moment, about the various identities of people in the ancient world and what things are. But B'nai Yisrael has their covenant with God, which is at Sinai. But B'nai Yisrael is actually a subset of B'nai Noach, right? There was the children of Adam, right? Then B'nai Noach, who was a child of Adam, right? We call it the covenant of Noach because there's new and improved. It's a re-establishment of the covenant, a renewal of the covenant of Adam with maybe a few little addendums. We call it like 1.1 or whatever, covenant 1.1. And then later there's a specific covenant for the people of Israel, which specifically gives us a lot more rules and a lot more roles and a lot more instruction in how to be the priests for the rest of the world, for humanity. The Jewish people are designed to be the teachers, the priests, for the laity, which is the humanity, which we call B'nai Noach. Now, it's actually, the term B'nai Noach doesn't actually, it is in our parsha, but they're referring to the three of them, Ham, Shem, and Yafet, who are the children of Noach. But the idea of B'nai Noach and the concept really wasn't so much in the Tanakh, but the sages, Chazal talks about it quite extensively. They talk about more than 7 mitzvot. They talk about 30 mitzvot. Another place talks about even more. And a couple of places we're going to talk about all those various things when we get into specifics. We like to use the number 7 because 7 is one of those wonderful numbers and those are the big general categories. And then there's a lot of specific mitzvot. If you want to compare this 7 mitzvot of B'nai Noach, compare it to the 10 commandments at Sinai, which were given specifically to B'nai Yisrael, as in big general categories. Okay. Now, an interesting thing the covenant of Noach was actually according to the Talmud, which is the compendium, the protocol of a lot of the discussions of the sages of the court, of the big court, in the section called Baba Kama, which means first gate, in page 38a, it says that actually the covenant of Bnei Noach was revoked. And right there on the page in this protocol, the rabbi says, "What? It was revoked? How is that possible? You can't have people without rules. It just makes no sense. You can't because you can't obligate, right? You can't obligate people to live a certain ethical, moral life if they don't know what that is." And then it comes to the conclusion it wasn't actually revoked. It was just that God stopped stressing it because He pushed everything for us as Bnei Yisrael to bring the light to the people. We're supposed to be the light unto the nations. Just like a flashlight, we're supposed to show the way. We haven't always succeeded in our path, and hopefully we will get better. One of the reasons that is suggested that we were exiled was so that we would go out into the world, go out amongst the people, and bring in all the various sparks, and teach the rest of the world the path of Torah. Anyway, the idea of Bnei Noach is not a new concept. It's actually was written about by several people. A very famous treatise by Hugo Grotius, about 400 years ago, wrote, I'll tell you in a moment, he wrote De Jura Belli Ach Pasis, right? There's a translation by F.W. Kelsey. It's published in London, Widely and Sons, 1964. He writes, compares he compares it to international law, and he says it's the basis for international law. He talks about how Abraham knew, which is the sages of course teach, that he learned at the house of learning at Shem and Ever, which are the children of Noah, and he learned how Abraham knew the law and was able to take up arms against the four kings to return the property. What else does he say? He says, to the human race we find that the law was thrice given by God. Okay? Immediately after the creation of man, that would be Adam Rishon, the first man. A second time in the renewal of humankind after the flood, right? And then a third time, obviously, at Sinai. Questions. The sages do say it was given to all of it was offered to all of humanity, but only we were foolish enough to take it, us Bnei Yisrael, but without even looking as to what it said first. Wait a second. But we took it, and we're supposed to now teach at least the part that applies to all of humanity. We will talk at length throughout all the various topics that I'm planning on talking about on what is prohibited, what is obligated, what is permitted, which is a different category. There are a lot of things that are permitted, or there's a question sometimes whether it's permitted or not permitted to do something that maybe is a non-Jew that wants to get close to God able to put on the Jewish prayer skull, the talit. It's a question. It's not really much of a question, but we'll get to that when we get there, and the various other obligations as to what there are, fill in things like that, those various things. But there are also parts of the rules, the hokim, are what we call the laws that are basically laws that are because God said so, that have no logical thing. But then there are also mishpat. Mishpat are those types of laws that almost any society needs at least some version of to be able to function. The idea of theft, the idea of murder, these types of things that a society can't really function without a certain amount of respect for personal and public property and private property and all these various things. And what those specifics are, we'll get into when we get there. But in other words, all of these is the basis. And Grotius talks about how this was all a basis for international law, of what he would like to suggest. About 50 years later, John Selden tried to compare the laws of Bnei Noach with the laws of his day. And in our last century, right, he died in the Jewish year of 5709, which was a year after the establishment of the State of Israel. Okay, this is the year 5775. We just had a new year, right? 5775. I will only use the Jewish years, and if you want to ask me about that, I'm more happy to tell you. But you can do the math, or it's not all that important. 5779 is almost 70 years ago. Not quite, about 65 years ago. There was a French Roman Catholic named Aimé Pallier, who was exploring the idea of God, and he was studying to be for the priesthood, as a matter of fact. And when he started learning Hebrew and comparing it with this, he found it difficult to reconcile the dogma of the church with what was written based on a lot of his learnings, and so he became a little lost. He tried the Salvation Army for a while, Protestantism for a little while, various other things. Eventually, he got in contact with a rabbi, Eliyahu Ben-Mozeg, who was Italian, and he started exchanging letters. He was in the idea, in the mindset, to convert to Judaism. Eliyahu Ben-Mozeg said, "Don't convert. Why convert? You already are part of humanity, of the covenant of Bnei Noach, of the covenant of Noach. There's no reason to convert. Not only that, it's not necessarily even. Not only is it not necessary, it's a question of whether it's even desirable." And now, Pallier says this idea repulsed him at first. What do you mean? Not be a Christian and not be a Jew? What does that mean? What's a Bnei Noach? What is this Noahism? Well, he says in his Le Sanctere Inconnu, and this is a translation, "Noahism, of which I was hearing for the first time, surprised and repelled me as an inconsistent thing, the name of which was even strange. Not to be any longer a Christian and to retain the name, not to be a Jew, and yet after a fashion to acclaim Judaism, was an equivocal position which had no attraction for me." In other words, what is this? It's nothing. It seemed weird to him. But Rav Ben-Mozeg returns the letter, and he says something very, very important. Please pay attention. He says, look, Noahism seems to you as far and distant and supernated thing, and you ask how, after 19 centuries of Christianity, after all the religious progress that our Bible and your gospel represents, I can dream of taking you back to the rudiment of the worship founded after the flood. Is this possible? Yes, he says. Back to basics. In fact, he says, I don't see how it's possible that you do not see the perpetuity, the future immutability could not exist save on condition that they also existed in the past. There is no doubt that the Bible, aside from the universalistic passion of the prophets, gives the impression that in carrying out the compact, the contract, the covenant made with the fathers, God was chiefly concerned with the chosen people, to the exclusion of other people. Not true. Hence, but that's the impression. Hence, the accusation leveled against Judaism that it could never rise in entirety above the conception of a national God. But can it be imagined for a single moment that after having concerned himself so much with the descendants of Noah, which means with all of humanity, according to Bereshit, Genesis, God, after long centuries of waiting, would give a special law to the Israelites appointed to be the priests of humanity, and would not have troubled himself in any way about the rest of the human race, rejecting it until the appearance of Christianity, leaving it totally abandoned, without revelation and without law. And again, is it reasonable to conceive that in abolishing the Noahide covenant of Genesis, and there's no place to find that abolition ever to be found, would God, during all this long interval, leave no other resource to man than the help of his poor reason, which we don't seem to do so well with? This would have been unreasonable, unjust, imprudent, unworthy even of a mortal, let alone God. For it would entirely undermine faith in the necessity of revelation. And yet, all this is a small matter compared to the great things which the Talmud reveals to us. The monument, this is another place, by the way. I didn't continue. This moment of tradition occupies itself, in fact, with a marked predilection for everything that concerns the Noahide religion and legislation. In another place he says, you seem dissatisfied about the antiquity of Noahism, and you do not realize that antiquity is the most infallible sign of truth. Consequently, the further back it goes, the more it appeals to us. Of course. Nothing was added. It's just the essence. I have spoken about the proselyte of the gate, that is to say, the Noahide in person. It is true with the Noahide himself that the Pentateuch, that's Bible for you and me, is concerned in specifying that the proselyte is in no way obligated to observe the Mosaic law. That is to say that the Torah obliges us to give him the animal which is forbidden for us as Bnei Israel to eat. We must give it to him instead, selling it to the stranger, a Gentile, or pagan. Obvious proof that according to the Pentateuch, this proselyte is no longer considered a stranger or a pagan. We have to give it to him instead of selling it, right? He's not considered a pagan or a stranger. Rather, he's not assimilated to being a Jew. Rather, he is the proselyte at the gate. He is the Ben Noach, right? So he represents not precisely this Noahide, which name sounds so strange to ears. What else could he be? This difficulty which you experience does not hinder the Noahide from becoming part of the church universal. On the contrary, it is the Noahide themselves who make up the faithful, the people of that true church, which Israel is the priest. Israel would have no reason to exist if these people of God did not also exist. What are the priests? I ask you, teachers, right? Priest is a teacher. Without the layman, what would I, a Jew, be if you, who are not a Jew, were not here as a faithful member of the great congregation of God, in whose service I myself place? So there we have it. I think wonderfully put about the idea and the role of Bnei Noach. So what's the goal? What's the purpose? What is this covenant? What are we trying to achieve? I mentioned in the beginning, if this is the same version that I think it is of the video, that the purpose is that we as a humanity will begin to perfect the world. God made us partners. God made us partners in his creation. Junior partners, but partners. The way we do that, the way we perfect the world, is by perfecting ourselves through our own ethical and moral development. God gives us guidelines. He also gave us teachers to help us along those lines. The more we perfect ourselves, the more we have an influence around others around us, the more they have an influence. And eventually we'll perfect this entire thing called creation. Jews are often accused or falsely ascribed to not having an idea of heaven or an idea of the next world. We do. The next world is very important. It's part and parcel of our theology, our philosophy, and what we do things for. It's actually the essential part. In fact, we talk about how this world is simply a hallway, a foyer for the world to come, for the next world. However, while in this world, the way we make sure that our entry into that next world is how we deal with how we enter this world and leave this world, what we come in with and what we leave with. So we have an idea of perfection in the world. We will never achieve perfection, ever. Not possible. It's like the mathematic idea of always getting close to zero, half-lives, right? You know, you always get half, until you get close to zero. Shiluv lefis in Hebrew, getting close, approaching zero, but we never reach at zero in this world. As an individual, that possibility only exists after death. A few little turns here, and then we might be able to achieve that. That says in our tradition, the Talmud, that there are 4 people that only died because of the sin of the snake, meaning the Adam Rishon, the first sin. Those 4 people would have been able to achieve perfection, but they didn't. We won't get into that too much at this point because we have death. Death is actually the final thing that brings us over the edge, but we're supposed to delay death as long as possible. We're not supposed to be running towards death because we have a lot of work to do. We have to make sure we are fit and appropriate for the next world, for that next level, and we also have to make the world as best to be. We're all in this together. This idea of perfection, this idea of bringing the world towards perfection, is our goal. It's our task. It's our responsibility. It's our privilege. Again, it's a huge privilege. Think about this. Hashem, the Almighty God, said, I want human beings to be a partner in this grand enterprise called creation. And he gave us the ability and the tools to achieve this. Now, we don't always move in that direction. In fact, we tend not to. But that is part of being human. Humanity is we have the ability to be higher than angels, because angels have no inclination towards selfishness. Towards they only do their role, malachim in Hebrew. But the angels, they do their role, and that's it. Animals also, they do their role. Animals can't really be evil. A lion that tears out another animal, and he's not being cruel. He's being an animal. He's being a lion. Humans, on the other hand, have the unfortunate, but it's we have the choice. We have free will. We can either be cruel and towards evil, move away from God. Evil is moving away from God, from the plan, from the goal, right? Or we can be good, moving towards the goal, towards God, right? That direction. Now, a lot of times it's a combination. A lot of times we sometimes, it depends on the day, this, but our goal is daily to move towards perfection. Our goal is daily to move forward. We are given a task towards perfection. That task was given to Adam Rishon. He failed. In fact, but that was also an opportunity, and that opportunity gives us an opportunity to work on getting back to that level of perfection. We have aspects of us that are not imperfect, that are perfect. Our sense of smell, allegedly, was uncorrupted. Pay attention to the first story. In the first sin of Adam and Hava, Eve, right? She looked at the fruit, tasted the fruit, touched the fruit, heard the voice of the snake, but she never smelled it. The smell, the idea of smell, is the uncorrupted scent, which is why our sages will talk about how the Mashiach, the future anointed king, will be able to smell truth, because the sense of smell has a specific uncorruptedness to it. This is also Rabbi Nachman, for instance, and other sages talk about how the tzaddikim, the righteous ones, come from the nose of the primordial man, the paradigm of man, right? And the big soul. Right? There was one, according to our tradition, there was one soul, and then it was broken up into a lot of pieces. Rabbi Nachman says he came from the nose, and a few other people as well. Just in food for thought. But our goal is to go by our nose and to move towards perfection, to perfect the world, to bring the world to perfection through our own self-reflection, through teaching, through this. Right? We're not here to convert anybody. We're not here to make somebody into something that they're not, to make a fish into a bird or a bird into a fish. But rather, what we are to do is to make the bird the best bird it can be, the fish the best fish it can be, the Bnei Yisrael the best Bnei Yisrael it can be. And everybody has their specific role. Everybody has their specific place in the whole enterprise. Just like in an army, there's armor division, logistics, right? Everybody has their place and their role in this entire enterprise. That's hopefully going to lead us towards perfecting the world and bringing the light of God to us. So here's to leave you with a good Shabbat Shalom. I hope this video brings a little bit of light into your life. Help awaken the light that's within you, to help bring light to others, and may we all share in the light of God. And I'll hopefully meet you on the other side. Please feel free, leave comment, a link to the B'nai Noach webpage. Again, I'm on a Beit Din for B'nai Noach, and I also more than happy to discuss things with you privately. You can probably leave my Facebook thing here and all those other stuff. Figure out how to do that. Anybody wants to help me with any of this, you're more than happy to try and help me, because up to here and things. But that's the way it is. Anyway, so have a good Shabbat. May Hashem be with you, and may you all be blessed and share in the light. Be well.